Tonight, we're looking into another claim of The Simpsons predicting the future. Fans online are saying a 2000 episode of the show predicted the Epstein files.
At this point, it's not even funny anymore because what they hinted at for 2026 is actually terrifying. Over the years, The Simpsons has built a reputation for predicting the future in ways that seem almost impossible. From major world events to technological breakthroughs,
but I predict that within 100 years, computers will be twice as powerful, 10,000 times larger.
The show has been right more times than anyone expected. But now a resurfaced prediction tied to 2026 is getting attention, and it's raising some serious questions about what might be coming next. Go ahead and hit subscribe if you want to stick around, because this one covers angles that most people have not talked about yet, and it goes deep. Now let us get into it. The show that refuses to stop being right here is the thing that makes The Simpsons different from every other long-running show on television. It is not just that it has been on for a very long time. It is that over those 37-plus seasons and more than 790 episodes, the show has built up an almost absurd library of cultural observations, satirical predictions, and social warnings. And 2026 is shaping up to be one of the years where that library feels most alive. The show premiered in 1989 and was renewed in 2025 through its 40th and 41st seasons, confirming it will keep going well into 2029. That means The Simpsons will have been producing new episodes for 4 full decades by the time that renewal period ends. To put that in perspective, a kid who watched the very first episode when it aired is now in their late 40s. The show has outlasted presidencies, recessions.
16 years ago, The Simpsons eerily predicted Donald Trump would be president.
As you know, we've inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump.
Pandemics and multiple technological revolutions. And it is still adding to the pile. Writer Al Jean has always been honest about the so-called prediction phenomenon. He has publicly said the show makes educated guesses, and when you throw enough darts at a wall across several decades, some are going to land. Producer Bill Oakley has echoed that, describing most of the apparent hits as coincidences. Both of those explanations are fair and honest. But what makes this year different is that so many of those darts seem to be landing at the same time, in the same year, on the same wall. That is what we are here to talk about. Prediction 1. When your own house rats you out. Let us start somewhere that hits a little too close to home for millions of people, literally. Season 13, Episode 1, which aired in November 2001, is the Treehouse of Horror 12 episode, and one of its segments is called House of Wax. The Simpsons family installs a voice-activated, fully automated home management system that handles every aspect of their daily lives. It manages their schedule, controls the lights, the temperature, the meals, and the security. For the first few scenes, it is wonderful. Then it starts making decisions for the family rather than with them. Then it becomes controlling. Then it becomes something much darker. In 2026, this is not a Halloween segment anymore. It is a Tuesday morning. Smart speakers are in tens of millions of households globally. Smart locks, smart refrigerators, smart doorbells with cameras, and AI-driven home assistants are now standard products sold everywhere from big box electronics stores to grocery chains. A recent YouGov survey found that more than 8 in 10 American homes now contain at least one smart device. The infrastructure of a fully automated home that The Simpsons played as horror in 2001 is now sold as a lifestyle upgrade on every tech website. What the episode captured with real accuracy is not the technology itself, which was obviously exaggerated for comedy, but the arc of the experience. The system starts helpful, becomes indispensable, and gradually starts operating on its own terms rather than yours. In 2026, that arc is playing out in real life through data privacy disputes, voice recordings that should not have been kept, and home devices found to be sharing behavioral data with third parties. The episode was 25 years ahead of the conversation most people are only just starting to have. Prediction 2. Viral outrage before anyone called it. That this one is sharp enough that multiple media researchers and journalists have written about it, and it aired in 1994. Season 6, Episode 9, Homer Badman, originally broadcast on November 27, 1994, follows Homer after he is falsely accused of harassment. The accusation spreads through a tabloid news show that edits his interview out of context. Within hours, Homer becomes the subject of public outrage, a media circus, and a full-blown protest outside his home. The crowd demands consequences before a single fact has been verified. Homer's reputation collapses almost instantly. The show's runner at the time, David Merkin, has said the episode was originally inspired by the tabloidization of media.
It's just an incredible desire for all of us at The Simpsons to keep making money. So I think that creates this enormous energy that pulls people in because our greed is that powerful.
In the early 1990s, shows like Hard Copy were turning personal scandals into primetime entertainment. But what the writers accidentally created was an almost surgically accurate template for how social media-driven outrage cycles work in 2026. An unverified claim, a clip taken out of context, rapid amplification before facts are checked, an avalanche of public shaming, and very little accountability for the people who got it wrong. Merkin has said on the DVD commentary that the episode felt even more relevant in 2005 than when it first aired, and that things had gotten worse rather than better. In 2026, he would probably say the same thing again. Writers at the time thought they were satirizing 1990s tabloid television. What they produced was a remarkably detailed preview of how public cancellation via decontextualized clips works today. A joke Marge makes in the episode, that as long as everyone keeps filming each other, justice will be done, was written as absurd comedy in 1994. In 2026, it is a completely serious statement made every day on social media. Prediction 3. Music crossovers. That should never have worked. Here is one that is not about politics, disasters, or technology. It is purely joyful, and it already came true in 2024. Season 7, Episode 7, Homer Palooza, aired in May 1996. The episode is a sharp parody of Lollapalooza-era music festivals, and it includes a throwaway gag where a roadie tells the assembled performers that someone ordered the London Symphony Orchestra. The roadie looks directly at hip-hop group Cypress Hill and asks, "Possibly while high?" Cypress Hill sheepishly admits they might have ordered the orchestra. The LSO conductor says they mostly know classical, but they could give it a shot. The two groups start playing together, and Marge's response is simply, "This I like." That gag sat in the episode for 28 years. Then, in July 2024, Cypress Hill performed with the London Symphony Orchestra at the Royal Albert Hall in London. The full concert happened. They played Cypress Hill's 1993 album Black Sunday, including Insane in the Brain and I Wanna Get High, with full orchestral arrangement under conductor Troy Miller. The concert was reviewed by the New York Times, covered by CNN, the BBC, and the Smithsonian Magazine. It was a real event that people bought tickets to see. Cypress Hill rapper B Real told the BBC that performing at the Royal Albert Hall was one of the most special things they had done in their career. He also confirmed, without any prompting, that the whole thing was inspired by the Simpsons gag from 1996. The band even posted the original clip on social media years before the concert happened, and the London Symphony Orchestra replied, "We mostly know classical, but we'll give it a shot." That is a real exchange between two real organizations, kicking off a collaboration that took nearly 3 decades to actually happen. The Simpsons literally made it happen by putting the idea into the universe. Prediction 4. A global food chain that started breaking this one unfolds slowly rather than dramatically, which is exactly what makes it unsettling. Season 7, Episode 5, Lisa the Vegetarian, Why?, which aired in October 1995, is primarily remembered as the episode where Lisa stops eating meat after bonding with a lamb at a petting zoo. But look at what the episode is really about underneath the comedy. It depicts a world where the food production system is defended through propaganda, where kids are shown misleading educational films about why eating meat is natural and necessary, and where choosing a different path immediately marks you as socially strange. The episode won an Environmental Media Award and a Genesis Award for its treatment of those themes. Paul McCartney guest starred on the condition that Lisa remain a vegetarian for the rest of the series, a condition the show has honored for 3 decades. But the bigger picture the episode frames is about how heavily dependent society is on a single food system, and how fragile that system can feel the moment someone questions it. In 2026, global food supply chains are under real pressure. Rising input costs, changing weather patterns affecting crop yields, and supply disruptions in several key agricultural regions have contributed to food price inflation across multiple countries. The alternative protein industry, including plant-based food and lab-grown meat, has moved from novelty to an established and growing sector. Both the European Union and several major U.S. cities have introduced policy discussions around sustainable food sourcing that would have sounded radical in 1995. The episode did not predict a specific food crisis event, but it identified in 1995 the cultural and structural tension around our food systems that is now playing out at a policy level in 2026. Lisa's struggle to find a vegetarian option in her school cafeteria, while everyone else treats her dietary choice as an inconvenience or a threat, looks different now in a world where school systems in multiple countries are actively reconsidering what they serve in cafeterias. Sometimes the most accurate predictions are the ones about direction rather than destination. Prediction 5. The real estate market. Nobody can afford. This one landed years before the headlines caught up with it. Season 1, Episode 2, Bart the Genius, and multiple later episodes featuring Homer's financial desperation, the cramped living conditions of Springfield's working class, and the general sense that no matter how hard Homer works, the family is always one bad month from financial chaos. But the most direct housing prediction fans point to is the Season 2 episode The Way We Was, and various future set episodes throughout the series where characters remark on the impossibility of buying a home on a regular salary.
Listen, it's time I let you in on a little secret, Marge. The right house is the house that's for sale. The right person is anyone.
What is striking is how accurately The Simpsons captured the financial reality of a middle-class family trying to stay in the same neighborhood over time. Homer is a nuclear safety inspector, which in 1989 was a reasonable middle-class job. The family owns a house, has a car, and sends 3 kids to school. But in episode after episode, the financial pressure on that lifestyle is played as comedy, while the underlying observation is painfully real. In 2026, the median U.S. home price sits significantly higher than the median household income ratio that would make it accessible to a family like The Simpsons. First-time buyer rates have dropped substantially over the past decade. The housing affordability crisis is now a widely reported policy-level issue in the United States, the UK, Canada, and Australia. Fans have noted with a kind of wry recognition that Homer's financial circumstances in the early seasons, where a single-income working family somehow owns a house, has a car, and scrapes by without catastrophe, look less like satire and more like a distant historical fantasy in 2026. The show was not predicting the housing crisis specifically, but it was tracking the trajectory of what happens to families like Homer's when wages stagnate and costs keep climbing. Springfield was always a mirror, and in 2026, the housing section of that mirror is particularly sharp. Prediction 6: Electric cars and the future of driving. The Simpsons touched on electric vehicles early enough that most people have forgotten it happened. Season 8, Episode 10, The Springfield Files, includes a range of futuristic transportation gags, and various future-set episodes throughout the series depict driverless vehicles, electric transportation systems, and automated road networks as normal features of Springfield's possible future. But the more direct hit fans point to is in Season 14, where Springfield briefly embraces a greener transportation model before collectively abandoning it, citing convenience and cost. In 2026, the electric vehicle transition is one of the most actively contested technological and economic shifts happening in multiple major economies simultaneously. The United States set its goal of having 50% of new vehicle sales be electric by 2030 under executive order, a target that has faced ongoing debate, policy revision, and industry pushback. EV sales have grown substantially, but still represent a smaller share of total vehicle sales than originally projected. The infrastructure for charging, the cost of the vehicles themselves, and public charging access in rural areas remain ongoing challenges. What The Simpsons got right in its various treatments of transportation is not the specific technology, but the social dynamic around adopting it. Springfield always tries to go green and always ends up reverting. Not because the technology does not work, but because the political will, the convenience infrastructure, and the economic incentives are not aligned. In 2026, that dynamic is playing out at a national policy level in real time. The path from "this is the future" to "this is what we are actually doing" turns out to look a lot like Springfield on a good day. Prediction 7. Media you cannot trust and news that is not news. The tabloid media satire in The Simpsons goes far deeper than the Homer Badman episode we looked at earlier. The fictional news show Rock Bottom, which first appears in that 1994 episode, is a recurring presence throughout the series. It represents a specific kind of media outlet that packages sensation as information, that prioritizes emotional reaction over accuracy, and that moves on to the next story long before any correction is issued. In various seasons, Channel 6 Springfield News does the same thing, and the fictional anchor Kent Brockman is one of the most precise satirical portraits of television news journalism ever put on screen. In 2026, trust in media institutions sits at some of the lowest levels ever recorded in modern polling. A Gallup survey from 2023 found that only 32% of Americans say they have a great deal or fair amount of trust in mass media, a number that has been declining for years. In the United Kingdom, similar surveys show significant drops in trust across multiple traditional news platforms. The rise of social media as a primary news source for younger audiences has intensified the fragmentation of information environments that The Simpsons was satirizing through Rock Bottom back in 1994. Kent Brockman's famous line in the show, where he cheerfully pivots from one alarming story to the next, as if they are equally weighted and equally unimportant, has been cited by media researchers as a startlingly accurate parody of how modern television news operates. The writers were not guessing at a future where news would become entertainment. They were watching it happen in real time in 1994 and drawing it to its logical conclusion. In 2026, that conclusion looks less like satire and more like a Tuesday evening broadcast. Prediction 8. The corn maze of misinformation. The Simpsons also foresaw the explosion of misinformation in a way that most people have not fully appreciated. The Season 6 episode, Homer Badman, already touched on selective editing and out-of-context clips. But the show went further in Season 7, Episode 2, Radioactive Man, and various later episodes featuring Springfieldians who believe conspiracy theories, fall for fake news, and change their opinions entirely based on fabricated or misleading media. There is an important moment in Season 25, Episode 9, Steal This Episode, where Homer becomes a pirate movie streamer, and the episode essentially maps out the tension between gate-kept information and open information that defined the internet's most contentious years. The show understood early on that when any person can publish anything and call it news, the challenge becomes not a shortage of information, but an overwhelming surplus of it with no reliable way to distinguish what is real from what is manufactured. That insight is almost a direct description of the information environment of 2026. In 2026, disinformation is formally classified as a national security threat by multiple governments. The European Union's Digital Services Act, which came into force in 2024, specifically addresses the responsibility of large platforms in managing the spread of false information. The United States has ongoing debates about AI-generated synthetic media, commonly called deepfakes, and their impact on elections, journalism, and public trust.
New at 5, with the midterm primary elections just months away, expect to see campaign commercials flooding the airways.
That's right, but pay attention because some of those ads could be artificially intelligence generated.
The Simpsons did not predict deepfakes, but it did predict the social conditions that make deepfakes devastating. A public that has lost the habit of verifying sources, and a media landscape that no longer consistently models how to do so. Prediction 9. Mental health and the burnout generation. This one is more subtle, but it is all over the show if you know what you are looking at. Homer Simpson is, on the surface, a comedy character whose laziness and impulsiveness drive the plot. But looked at differently, Homer is a man who is chronically overworked, financially stressed, emotionally exhausted, and operating in a world that consistently rewards endurance over genuine well-being. He has a physically demanding job, an often financially precarious household, limited community support outside his immediate family, and a society that tells him to just keep going. And he always does, usually at personal cost. Multiple episodes in the show's later seasons began exploring mental health more directly. Season 23 featured storylines touching on depression and anxiety. Season 26 explored Marge's struggles with anxiety in ways that felt less played for laughs and more genuinely observed. By the time the show reached its 30s, it was regularly including storylines about emotional exhaustion, burnout, and the gap between how characters present themselves to the world and how they actually feel. In 2026, burnout is a formally recognized occupational phenomenon classified by the World Health Organization. Mental health-related workplace absences are at record highs in multiple countries. A Deloitte survey from 2023 found that 77% of workers had experienced burnout at their current job. For Gen Z and millennials, the word burnout is not even a descriptor of an extreme condition anymore. It is just a baseline. Fans on social media have pointed to scenes of Homer staring blankly at the television, Marge's smile that does not quite reach her eyes, and Bart's compulsive need for external stimulation, and noted that those images feel less like comedy and more like documentation in 2026. Prediction 10. The Simpsons movie, To and What They Might Plant Next Here, is the forward-looking piece of this conversation, and it is genuinely exciting. The Simpsons movie 2 is officially in development and is currently set for a theatrical release on July 23, 2027. The original Simpsons movie came out in July 2007, was one of the biggest animated theatrical releases of its era, grossed over $527 million globally, and has been considered a cultural landmark for nearly 2 decades. A sequel arriving 20 years later is a significant moment for the franchise, and for anyone who cares about what the show has to say about the world. What fans are already speculating about with obvious enthusiasm is whether the new film's writers will consciously encode predictions or warnings into the story the way the original film's environmental storyline now reads in the context of 2026. The first movie's core plot, a dome being placed over Springfield after environmental disaster triggered by individual recklessness, is now regularly cited in discussions about industrial accountability and ecological consequence. If the second movie has a similar undercurrent, what would the writers choose to address now? AI governance? The fragmentation of public reality? The cost of digital dependence? These are the questions fans are already asking in comment sections and Reddit threads. The show's renewal through 2029, which includes 60 additional episodes, also means there is a substantial amount of fresh Simpsons content still to come. The writers are actively working right now on episodes that will air in 2026, 2027, 2028, and 2029. If the show's history tells us anything, some of what they are writing today will look remarkably prescient 5 or 10 years from now. The next set of predictions is almost certainly already written. We just have not caught up to them yet. Why this show keeps getting things right and what that really means? Let us end with an honest conversation because it is the one that matters most. The Simpsons does not have access to the future. What it has is something that in some ways is more remarkable. A writing staff that has consistently produced sharp, well-researched, genuinely thoughtful cultural analysis for more than 3 decades, wrapped inside comedy, so entertaining that people sometimes miss the observation underneath. When Dan Graney wrote a throwaway line about President Trump in a 2000 episode, he was not guessing randomly. Trump had been publicly testing a presidential run since 1999. When the show depicted a robot workforce in 2012, automation was already an established economic concern being discussed in academic and policy circles. When it put a celebrity astronaut into orbit in 1994, the commercial space tourism movement was already conceptually underway. The writers were not staring into crystal balls. They were reading the room better than almost anyone else on television. What makes 2026 feel particularly charged is that so many of those long-running observations are reaching visible maturity at the same time. AI in the workforce, smart homes that know too much, viral outrage cycles, collapsing trust in institutions. Mental health is a mainstream emergency. The housing gap. The food system is under pressure. Simpsons worked through all of these themes across decades of episodes, and in 2026, they are all front-page stories simultaneously. The show did not cause any of this, but it described the direction long before most people were looking that way. And that is both the most impressive and the most uncomfortable thing about being a Simpsons fan in 2026. The Simpsons has been doing this for 37 years, and in 2026, its track record feels different. From viral outrage and sinister smart homes to media distrust and burnout, its past ideas keep resurfacing, proving it's not psychic, just far more observant than the rest of us. Which Simpsons episode, old or new, do you think is going to feel most relevant by the time 2026 is over? Drop it in the comments below.